Okay, so with this revelation, you got to stay with me, okay? Because it was a lot of connections. You just got to stay with me on this, okay? Follow me, camera. But I wrote notes, so I'm going to be reading off the notes. Anywho, God gave me revelation to begin with through revelation. He led me to look in Revelation 21, verses 4 through 7, okay? And he had me highlight certain things within those verses. So within verse 5, the Lord had me highlight. Well, first, when I read it, I first read Revelation 21, 4 through 7. Then he told me to write it out. He told me to write it down. Okay? And so I wrote down verses 4 through 7 of Revelation 21. And after writing that down, he had me highlight these parts of the verses. So in verse 5 of Revelation 21, he had me highlight, "Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new." And then in verse 6, he had me highlight, "And he said to me, It is done." And then, lastly, verse 7, he had me highlight the full verse 7, which says, "He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son." Okay? And immediately after highlighting that, I got a notification on my phone that said new arrivals. So you remember verse 5, he had me highlight the part that said, "Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new." And like I said, after I finished writing this out and highlighting it, I got the notification that said new arrivals. Stay with me. And that verse 7 reminded me that God has been showing me a lot of sevens lately. And normally when God shows me like 777, he's telling me to fast. But I also know that when he's showing me a lot of sevens, it's just like to highlight the number 7, which is completion. Because on the seventh day, God rested from all his work, all his creation, and that's Genesis 2:2. And with that, God has been showing me a lot of 2s, but we'll get to that in a minute. Stay with me. So, as far as the sevens, I was led to look up 77 in the Strongs, and that means without cost, free of charge. And with that, I was led to look in Psalm 77, and he had me highlight verses 14 and 15, in which says, "You are the God who does wonders. You have declared your strength among the peoples. You have with your arm redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph." Now back to the 2s, because I mentioned that God has been showing me a lot of 2s. I was led to look up 222 in the Strongs. In the Hebrew, this is the spiritual applications, and the first one says, "Consecration precedes service." It says, "Leaders must cleanse themselves before bearing holy responsibilities." Hence God telling me to fast and showing me the 777 to fast. And not too long ago, I saw the phrase "press into service," and we'll get into that a little bit more. So with that, I heard the Lord led me to write down elevation, newness, purpose. Okay, so more with the 2s. I was led to look up Strong's. I was led to look up 2222 in the Strong's, and that's 4 2s in the Greek, and that means life. And he led me to look in John 10:10, which is the verse that says, "The thief comes only but to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come so that they may have life and have it more abundantly." After that, I was led to look up the same number in the Strong's, 2222, but the Hebrew, and that means drizzle, light rain. And it means a gentle, refreshing shower rather than a heavy downpour. Its sole biblical appearance places it within poetic parallelism, where subtle distinctions and rainfall imagery enrich the portrayal of divine blessings. So when I think about life more abundantly, I think of divine blessing. So we'll get back to the life more abundantly, but I want to get into the part where God showed me, or rather led me to look up 222 in the Strong's Hebrew, and at the spiritual applications when it says that consecration precedes service. And I want to make it clear that consecration is a significant biblical concept that denotes the act of setting apart a person, place, or object for the service and worship of God. This act is deeply rooted in the understanding of holiness and dedication to the divine purpose. Throughout these scriptures, consecration is portrayed as both a divine initiative and a human response, reflecting the covenant relationship between God and his people. So that being said, the Lord led me to to read Romans chapter 2, verses 18 through 20, and that says, "And know his will and approve the things that are excellent, being instructed out of the law, and are confident that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, having the form of knowledge and truth in the law." He also had me to look at Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, where it says, "Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." So with all that being said, God had me connected like this. Leaders, those who have spiritual gifts, who are supposed to be using their spiritual gifts for the glory of God, for his kingdom, must consecrate themselves, must cleanse themselves. And I'm going to say fasting and consecration. Fasting and consecration, humbling themselves. They must humble themselves before God for clarity, revelation, purification, before bearing holy responsibilities, before pressing into service. Okay, so he allowed me to put it in this order: cleansing, humbling, elevation, newness, purpose. And he allowed me to understand the reason for refinement is importance. Being refined is the equivalent to being humbled, purified, before walking into the next, walking into purpose. I know there's a lot of people out there, and they're probably in situations and they don't understand why they're in this situation, why God has had them in this situation, or why he's had them in this situation for so long, and they're wondering why, they can't move forward. You have to understand the importance of refinement. You have to understand the importance of consecration. You have to understand the importance of being cleansed, being purified, being humbled before you can be elevated, before you can walk into newness, before you can walk in your purpose fully for the glory of God, for his kingdom. But for a lot of people, God is highlighting that it is now going to be a time when you are getting ready. You are now walking into purpose. You are pressing into service. The time is coming. And he just wanted you to understand the reason why you were at this place for so long, why you were in this position for so long. You were being refined in God's order, to press into service. Back to verse 7 in Revelation 21. "He who overcomes shall inherit all things. I will be his God, and he shall be my son." When you get through your refinement, you're going to have you're going to have multiple refinement seasons. But when you get through this refinement season and you press into service, you come into the new. That's just it. You're going to be coming into the new, those new arrivals. And like I said in verse 6, where he had me highlight, "It is done." Just be in expectation and thank God in this process. And a lot God has been telling me, highlighting to me, to stop complaining. He wants you to stop complaining, because this is all for your benefit. Because you have to remember that the Lord came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. But God is a God of order. There are things that need to take place before your elevation, before the newness. I hope you followed me with all of this, because it was a lot to unpack. But that's all I got. If I should have more, if God should give me more, I'm definitely going to make a part 2.